One of candidate Donald Trump's most repeated campaign promises was that he would stop the crumbling of America's infrastructure with a much-needed massive federal investment.
We will build the greatest infrastructure on the planet Earth, the roads and railways and airports of tomorrow.
We can have plenty of money left over for infrastructure. You know, the infrastructure of our country. I know it's also great jobs, but the roads, the airports, the hospitals, the tunnels, the bridges.
Wouldn't it be great if we could rebuild our infrastructure under budget and ahead of schedule? We can do it. We can do it. But I know how to build.
Today, President Trump released what he is calling an infrastructure plan that does not actually guarantee the building or repairing of any infrastructure at all anywhere in the country. At best, the plan suggests that the federal government would be willing to pay as much as 20% of the cost of an infrastructure project, where cities and states would have to be willing to cover the other 80% or more of that project. Of course, the reason the federal government is in the infrastructure business is because the states cannot afford to cover that much of their infrastructure costs. And much of our infrastructure is, by its very nature, interstate, like, for example, the interstate highway system. The federal government has always covered a much higher share of federal infrastructure costs than 20%, usually around 80%. That offering 20% is like someone making you the offer of paying 20% of a $500,000 Rolls Royce for you, but you still cannot afford the other $400,000 for that car, and so there's not going to be a new Rolls Royce in your driveway anytime soon. The most likely outcome for the Trump infrastructure plan is nothing, meaning that no infrastructure bill is likely to pass this Congress. If the Trump infrastructure bill did pass the Congress, the outcome is still likely to be nothing or next to nothing. There actually might be no cities and states that take up the federal government's offer to cover 20% of a new infrastructure project that these states and cities are not already planning to pay for on their own. When we come back from this break, you will hear Donald Trump telling you what he finds sexy about infrastructure, and it's worth waiting for. He is the first president ever to call infrastructure sexy. He did that today.
To me, this is a very, very sexy subject. The media doesn't find it sexy. I find it sexy because I was always a builder. I always knew how to build on time, on budget, and that's what we want here.
Let's see if Ezra Klein finds it sexy. Joining us now, Ezra Klein, the editor-at-large at Fox and host of the podcast, The Ezra Klein Show. Ezra, in that meeting today with mayors and governors in the White House about infrastructure, the president promised during the campaign he's going to be the greatest builder ever in the White House. He actually said to them, after he made them this offer to pay a small amount of some of these projects, he actually said to them, if you don't want it, that's okay with me, too. That's how hard he was actually pushing it today. If you don't want it, that's okay.
You know what I find sexy, Lawrence? Not that I expected this to be my
this
conversation
might not
tonight,
be the moment, Ezra. It might
but fully funded infrastructure bills that actually might work.
Me
so
too.
What I think is interesting about this bill, the White House keeps saying it's a $1.5 trillion bill, and to my deep frustration, the media keeps repeating this. This is a $200 billion bill. It has $200 billion of actual funding in it that they say they will pay for, but have not said how they will pay for. Of that, $100 billion takes the normal state federal match, where the feds give $4 for every $1 the states put towards highway construction, and reverses it so it's a $1 federal match to $4 the states kick in. The rest of it is a hodgepodge of like a rural slush fund and tax breaks to private infrastructure projects that are already going to happen anyway. And so they're saying it's going to elicit all of this money coming from other people because they're going to want to spend it so badly that it'll go up to $1.5 trillion. That isn't how this works. I do not understand why they did not decide to actually actually go big on an infrastructure bill. It would have been good politics, and clearly it's what Donald Trump actually believes. But they didn't. And this thing is not what they promised in the campaign, and it wouldn't do what they're saying and hoping it would do.
Well, I mean, one political reason is that the people who actually write this stuff, the congressional Republicans, are opposed to this kind of spending. They've been opposed to it for a long time. And so trying to get them to take money and apply it this way was an unlikely prospect from the start. And so they've come up with this thing that Chuck Schumer is calling a mirage. I mean, it is possible that none of those mayors and governors sitting there with the president today will take any of this 20% funded money.
Sure, but you know this. This is part of the lowering of the bar for Donald Trump. I mean, you're a historian of this stuff, and presidents do. They lead their parties in places they didn't necessarily intend to go. Donald Trump on George W. Bush on Medicare Part D and No Child Left Behind. I mean, you can go through example of presidents pushing their party to embrace parts of their agenda that their party maybe wasn't there on before, or going and working with the other party. Donald Trump could more than get some Republicans and a lot of Democrats together on a big infrastructure bill. The fact that he's decided to make no unusual deals, no creative deals, that isn't baked into this. That's him not having the interest or the intention to dig in on the details of governance, push his vision into an actual agenda, and then push those who are recalcitrant in his party behind that agenda. There's a very deep lack of leadership. He only does what is easy to do with Republicans, not what was actually meant to be a disruptive force about his campaign and his presidency, and it's one of the real disappointments of his administration.
Ezra, if they could get the media, some of the media, to believe that this is a $1.5 trillion bill, surely Donald Trump is one of the people they could convince this is a $1.5 trillion bill.
I'm sure that's correct, actually. That's been a big problem. You never really know when Donald Trump is spitting out these lines if he is trying to fool you, or if he is fooled, or if he has somehow fooled himself. It makes it very, very difficult. I often think, covering the Trump administration, I would much prefer that the president is lying than that he actually does not know what's going on, but I am never sure that that is the case.
Ezra, please come back on another night, because we do have crumbling infrastructure in this country. This is an urgent subject, and we didn't even get to some of the wackier ideas in here, like perhaps selling your favorite airport or your most frequently used airports. The president would like to sell some of those to private interests. We need to cover all of this. We've got to do it on another night. Ezra Klein, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.